We will be doing this painting in just about an hour. So Kirsten will be walking you through step by step. If you are watching just to be inspired tonight, remember you can always go back and watch this video on michaels.com on their community classroom page at any time. You can check out this video or any of our other great Let's Paint videos that we've had with Michaels the past couple months. So just wanted to remind everybody about that it's also available after, especially if you want to pause and go back and rewind or do the painting again. That's a great feature that Michaels is offering. Also, you can get all the products on michaels.com or go to the store and you can do curbside pickup, or I know a lot of stores are still offering delivery. So some great ways to get your product. If you don't have the exact product, don't worry. We can talk about substitutions. Just use what you have. It's just a time to be really creative. So we're excited to be here with everybody. And we will be doing a giveaway at the end. So we'll be picking somebody at random from the comments. So we'll do that live. And I think that's about it. Like I said, everybody's just getting in and getting settled. So Kirsten will be walking us through. And again, if you have questions or comments, please feel free to put them in the chat. I'll respond back to you, or we'll relay them over to Kirsten, or I'll be able to answer any of your questions. So fun painting. We haven't done one like this, so I'm excited.
Okay, should we get started?
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. So the first part's always very, very boring, but what we are going to do is we are going to base coat our canvas. And the only tips with this is the reason we're doing it, we're going to base coat it a dark color, the color that you almost don't see at all in the painting. And the trick with that is what that allows us to do is then just add lots and lots of color to get all of this dimension, almost chippy oil paint feel of a painting, very impressionistic, without having to go in and add dark colors. That will be our base coat. So it will be what shows through all of the light colors that we're adding to the top. So we are going to use the medium gray, and I'm just going to squeeze that out onto my palette. And I am going to use the 3/4 inch brush. And really with base coating, there is no trick. All you want to make sure is that you have just a really even, nice coverage on the top, the bottom, and the sides of your canvas. So we're going to do that. If you're more comfortable working with a smaller brush to base coat, definitely do that. But while everybody gets in and gets settled, we're just going to get started base coating our canvas. And again, I'm using that medium gray. If there's a few areas that maybe aren't covered as well, that's okay, because we're going to go in and cover all of that up. It just gives us a dark base to work on, which is a fun technique. Make it even more. Always get your edges. You want your canvas to look nice and professionally finished when you're done. You don't want to have big areas of paint buildup because it'll take a minute to dry. So just make sure it's a nice, even, smooth coat.
And we're using a number 10 brush.
You can use, yep. I always tell people use whatever comfortable brush is most comfortable in your hand. Some people love a bigger brush. Some people use a smaller brush. The number 10, or there's a 3/4 in there. Oh, I'm going to get a little bit more of the gray. You just want a nice, even coat. I'm going to go a little fast because I'm going to give mine a little bit of time to dry under the blow dryer just to speed that up. Doesn't have to be perfect. You can just kind of go over it and get any areas that are a little bit thicker flattened out. And know that we're going to go back over it with color. And then I am going to hit this with the blow dryer. In the last class, people asked if I use hot or cold. I like to switch back and forth if you've got the cold button, just because it feels like it goes a little bit faster, but either one will dry your canvas. Any questions before I dry it? I don't want to not be available.
Nope, I think you're good. Everybody's just base coating. I can see everybody
Okay.
paint with their gray.
Okay, I'm going to dry it. I think that's dry. You do definitely want to make sure, take the time to get it dry because you don't want to work on wet paint. Okay, I think that's pretty dry. Yeah. Well, I was making all that noise. Everything good? So
Yeah.
another tip for today is I like to use all of my paintbrushes as dry as they can be. So definitely, clean your brush off in between colors in the water, but always use a paper towel and get as much of the moisture out of the brush as you can. Because what we're going to be doing is kind of a dry brush technique, and you want a dry brush which allows you to create all of that texture better. The wet brush will soften that, and then you won't get all that texture. So clean your brush when you need it, but definitely get all that extra water out. And you can see on my canvas, like it's a great solid base coat, but there's a few areas. If this was the finished canvas, I would do a second coat. You don't have to worry about that. You don't have to go in and add a second coat. You just want it to be a dark base to apply all the rest of our color. Okay, I am gonna, everyone catching up? I'm gonna get a little bit of the dark green. I'm gonna go slow so everyone can get their canvases dry. Really make sure that gray is dry.
And people are asking why the dark base coat. And so that's part of the technique, that you're going to allow some of that dark to show through. But you don't have to do it. It's just part of the overall and the effect.
Yes, absolutely. You don't have to do any of these. I just love to teach some tips and techniques that I've used for years. And years ago, someone taught me this because like if you're painting on a white canvas, you have to apply a base coat to each individual area. You've got to base coat your sky blue, your house is white, and then you have to keep going in and layering light colors and dark colors, which you have dry time in between. You lose some of your texture. But if you start on a dark color, I have found that you're only adding in light colors. So your dark shadows automatically are in there just from where you've left off paint. I know it sounds a little bit confusing, but it's just a really fun, easy way to get those layers of color without having to let paint dry in between each step. It's just a really fun technique, especially when you're doing something that's loose and kind of feels like an oil painting. But you could do it on white, absolutely. You could do it on navy blue, which would be beautiful. You could do it on black. I always paint on black. I rarely paint on white anymore. So yeah.
And your green is Clover. Lots of people are asking. So
yep.
Clover, and what size brush?
And then, so right now, and here again, I'm going to say, use whatever brush is comfortable. All we're doing is applying a pattern, but I'm going to use the number 10, which is kind of the medium one in the set that I called out for.
Number 10.
All the water's out of it, dry bristles. And this is another spot in our paint class tonight, is have fun with this. Like I did 3 little houses. If you want to do one big house in the middle, do the exact same techniques, but just do one big house in the middle. Or if you want, you know, you like one shape better, absolutely have fun with it and make it your own. But I'm gonna do exactly what's on here just so it's easy for you guys to follow. So I am going to, another trick that someone taught me years ago is when you apply a pattern, always break it down into simple shapes that are just so easy for everybody. Squares, triangles, rectangles, angles, circles for a tree, you know, so you're not really taking the time to outline each specific area, because then you almost end up color book painting it and you lose a lot of the lesson of learning the different techniques. So someone told me just view it as a basic shape. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to divide the sky from the grass. So I always use my hands to measure. So that's about 4 fingers. I'm going to just put a tiny little mark. And then I'm looking over here, and that's about from my pointer finger to the base of my hand. You know, just very loose measurements with very little paint, no water. I'm just going to dry brush a really soft line. You never want your pattern to be super dark because you don't ever want to have to work to cover it up. So it almost looks like a little piece of chalk. But again, if you want a straight hill, if you want more sky and less grass, have fun with it. But I'm just going to do it the way so you guys can follow it this way. And then what I'm going to do is with my houses, I'm just going to view them as a shape. Because remember, we're not going to go in and color book like a coloring book. We're just going to use them as a guide. So I'm going to start with this first house. He's half in the grass and half on the sky. So again, very little paint and very light. I'm going to do a square, and then I'm going to set a triangle. I'm going to add a little bit more just so you guys can see it. I'm going to set a triangle on top of that square, but very loose. And like, for example, this is a great spot. I'm not going to add my door because that's going to be a little triangle or a little rectangle later. You don't want to add pattern on top of pattern because then you lose the ability or the comfort to learn the technique because you're outlining. Then I'm going to go into my second house, which you can see is part in the grass and part in the sky. So I'm just going to kind of divide it. He sits a little bit higher. Again, I like to measure with my finger. A little bit higher than the first house. So I'm just going to do a long rectangle, a tall rectangle, but very light. You don't ever want to work to cover your pattern. Picking up a little bit more paint, and then I'm going to put a triangle on top of that. And your pattern does not have to be perfect. It's just a great way to get placement and confidence so you know where to go. And then you can see 2 fingers is where that third house sits. 2 fingers, he kind of sits on top of that hill. He's a longer rectangle going horizontal, but very light. Can you guys see it? Yeah, you can see it's very light. Very little paint. And then this one, I'm gonna set a rectangle at a little bit of an angle. So let's scoot, so you've got the side of your house. Now what I'm gonna do is a long rectangle. You're gonna angle that up just a little bit. And you're just gonna do a long rectangle. Don't let that angle intimidate you at all. You've got your flat side. And you're just gonna angle that side, but it's still nothing more than a rectangle. Pick up a little bit more paint. And then I'm gonna plop a triangle on top of it. I'm not gonna go in there and do a pattern for the roof because we're gonna know where that hits after we base coat our houses. And then that same angle, I'm gonna do that on my roof, and then I'm just gonna connect it. So just really basic shapes, rectangles, squares, triangles, a little angle, but with this style of painting, that, if it's not exact, is not gonna matter. Just so I don't forget about this little guy, I'm gonna put a little circle, but again, just a very rough circle where that tree is, just so I don't forget about him. And if you want 2 trees, again, have fun with it. I'm just gonna do one right there for technique. So
I would let people get caught up on this and maybe walk them through again.
Okay, so the key when adding a pattern is very little paint, because I always say you don't want to have to work to cover up your pattern with your painting. So into the white and then kind of offload some of it on your palette. So just very little, like a dry brush. And then I just always tell people to look at it as a basic shape, a basic square with a triangle sitting on top, a longer tall rectangle with a triangle sitting on top. So this is a little square. I'm going to set that triangle on top. A longer rectangle, set that triangle on top. Just to give you, the basic footprint. A square. This, this was our tricky little house because we had him at an angle, but we just slanted that line, made a little bit of an angle there. Again, just a rectangle though with a triangle. And then we just connected the roof lines. So very simple placement. And that little circle is for your tree, just to give him a home. And like you guys, some of you might be saying, so this house has a little side section like that we're gonna create with our palette knife, which you can see I left it off, but if you wanna go in there and do it, you would just angle that up. Let me get a little bit more paint. You would just angle that up just a little bit and do a long rectangle. But there again, you don't really need to do that yet because it'll make perfect sense once we start using the palette knife. I'm not doing any pattern for the doors or the windows. And the reason I'm not doing that is because I don't want you guys to paint around your pattern. I want you to create all that beautiful texture in the house and then put your windows on top. How's it going? Any questions about the patterns?
Nope.
I'm going to clean my brush, but always dry it back off on your paper towel. And I am going to keep using my number 10 flat brush. So now what we can do, I'm going to slow down just a little.
Yeah.
Is I'm going to get a little bit of that pistachio on my palette. I've still got that dark green and a little bit of the white. So the neat thing about the dry brush, again, is you're layering color very simply. And the key to this is you can always add more, but you can't take it off. So always start light. I am going to pick up some of the dark green, not too much and no water. And I am going to base coat everywhere the grass is. Despite the color, I'm going to base coat green below the houses and at the bottom. And the key with the base coat, the dry brush, is don't create, it's kind of hard to see with the dark ones. Let me pick up a little green of the light green. You don't want to create a consistent pattern. Like you don't want to dry brush in a row like tile, because that pattern will dominate your entire painting. You want to be very random and I like to do little hash marks or little X's, and you want to jump around the canvas a little. Instead of working from left to right or top to bottom, you want to jump around, because what happens is as you pick up paint, more or less will look like a different color. And so you want to have different tones all over that base coated area. So you just want to do very random X's.
And you're still using the number 10?
I'm using the number 10.
Yep. Thank you.
Let me cover up the tile pattern I created in the middle. But you're not covering up your gray completely. You definitely want to make sure that the gray comes through. Okay, I'm going to go back to the dark green. Make sure it's still something you guys, yeah, you can see. See the difference? Yeah, the dark green's hard to see on the camera. I apologize for that. But I'm going to do that at the base of the houses and down on this side of the canvas. And another great tip someone said from the last class, do not worry about outlining and following that pattern. All you're doing is using that as placement. So if you overlap some of that pattern, that is absolutely fine, because your house is going to go in there and cover it up anyway. So I'm using only the dark green at first, very random, very dry brush. And then I'm going to add a little bit of the light green. And again, jump around that canvas so you don't get the same color always in the same spot.
And some people are saying you could even use a sponge to get some texture. So I think that's a great idea too.
Absolutely. That's a great idea.
Yep. And you're just using the Clover and the Pistachio.
Yep. And where they're kind of overlapping, they're mixing into a lighter green. If you want to, you can pick up a little scoop of pistachio and a little scoop of the dark and actually mix it on your plate, on your palette, if that makes you more comfortable. I like to just overlap them and let them blend as you load. But if you want to have a third color green, mix that on your palette paper and then do that dry brush technique with a light green, a dark green, and a medium green. So just very random. And all you're doing, this will not look like this yet, because always remember, this is the palette knife is how we're going to end this. This is just creating the base coat for the palette knife. But you've divided it into a dark green section under the houses, a medium tone green going diagonally below that, and then just a pop of a lighter green where the closest part of the field would be in the photo or on the canvas.
Yep. And if you don't have pistachio, you could always mix yellow and the clover together to kind of get that bright green.
Absolutely.
If you don't have a dark green, you could take a medium green and add some of the gray or brown or black to it. So I think just having those three tones is what's important. It doesn't matter if you have the specific colors.
Absolutely. Yep. You could even have one green and do a little white, a little more white, and a little more white. There's so many ways that you could do that. And if you get a buildup of paint on your brush, you don't need to go into the water because we're only working with shades of green. Just give that, get most of that buildup off on your paper towel. So in this corner, you can see it's lighter where it would be closer to you in a photo. I'm going to add just that pistachio, and then I might go in there and add a little bit of white to the pistachio, just to soften that green a little bit more. just to have a little highlighted area. But this is my favorite thing. So I'm not sure if you guys can tell. See where you see the canvas through there? You see the texture? That is something I absolutely love. It just really gives it a really professional look. Picking up a little bit more white. But be very random so that you don't create a pattern. And you can always go back. Like I'm going to add a little bit more of the dark green in some areas. But you're creating that shadow and that dimension on that hill. You don't want to cover up the gray completely though. But a really loose base coat. Now always make sure, I love these wrapped canvases, always make sure you do to the edge what you've done to the front, just so it looks nice and finished when you're done. So I go in there and do those same dry brush hashtag strokes on the bottom and the side. A nice finished look. And remember, if you overlapped a little bit onto your pattern for your house, that is perfect because your house will sit on that a little bit. Now you can go in, I'm not sure where you guys have trees, but if you've got trees where I've got one, I'm just gonna do a little bit of the dark, following my pattern, but covering it up. A little bit of that middle value green towards the middle. And then a little bit of that lightest pistachio towards the top. But it doesn't have to be a perfect circle. It doesn't have to be exactly like that. You just want to get the green on the canvas, most importantly. You see any areas where a lot of gray is showing and you like that? Leave that there because again, that's a shadow. If you want to add a little bit more though, cover that up. But definitely keep that canvas texture. I love that. Yeah, I think mine's exactly where I want it. I'm not going to worry at all about the stem of the tree right now. We'll go in and get that because again, I don't want you guys to work outlining it. I want it to have that real loose feel. I can do this. I think we did this in the last class and it was kind of helpful.
Yeah, it's crazy how it's already coming together. Like that tree looks so 3D and real already, just with a couple brush strokes.
And it's amazing because really it's the gray underneath that does most of that work for you. Because normally you would have to add that in and the dark base coat is just magical.
Yeah, I love it. Somebody was even mentioning in the chat the flower technique that you did last week. You could even add some flowers to the front of this when you're done if you wanted to.
Yep, absolutely.
Oh.
Okay. So now I'm going to do the same technique. I cleaned off my brush in the water, but using the paper towel to get most of that off, I'm going to use the sky blue. And I'm going to get a little bit more white. And this is a good spot if you want to try this technique with a larger brush or a smaller brush. Try that with the sky because you'll get, you definitely will get a different look, but very, very subtle. If you use the larger brush, you'll just get a bigger hashtag stroke. Let's see if that, I'll do that in the blue. Covers quicker, but just maybe a more, I don't know, maybe a more consistent, the bigger the brush is. as if you were using the number 10. It's really what you prefer. I'm going to use the number 10. But see how it's the exact same stroke? You can just use whichever brush you're most comfortable with. So all we're going to do here is, again, don't worry and don't overthink being specific to outlining. You're just going to get that blue background close to your pattern and complete your sky. And when you're working in these little areas, like let's go right here. When you're working in this area, don't trace. I don't want you guys at all to color book paint. Don't trace your pattern, because you will see that at the end in your painting. You want to be very random, maybe a stroke there, back and forth, so that you are not outlining or creating a pattern. Because with a technique like this, if you do outline at the very end, sometimes you'll see that halo and you'll be a little bit disappointed in the pattern that it creates. So I'm in the sky blue, no water, and then I'm back out and just very loose random strokes. Bumping all the way up to your pattern, but not going crazy working at covering it. Keeping some of that gray showing through. If you want a brighter sky, obviously you'll add more blue. If you want a little darker sky, maybe at evening, you want some more of that gray to show through. I'm going to get in there and do it under that little area where my tree is. But very random and loose. I'm going to sneak between this house a little bit. But again, don't trace it. You just want to be very random to get that color to separate those houses when we get to the palette knife. And then always do the same to your sides. Oops.
It's super relaxing just to watch this. I'm sitting here just staring at the thing. It's very, like, in a little trance.
It's fun. You know, that it's fun because it doesn't have to be perfect. I think that's what I like about this technique. It's just very easy and very rewarding to see all that color layer so quickly without having to do too much work.
Yeah. It really is coming together. It's funny how fast this one, people are commenting like how fast it looks like the painting, which is great.
Oh, I'm so glad.
It looks great.
So then on this one, and again, you'll see it's very different. A lot of people do just the dry brush technique, which is a great look. Depending on how bright or light you want your sky, you'll see these areas of white. All you can do is, and again, don't use water. You can just get off any extra paint on a paper towel and load a little bit of white right on top of that blue. And again, very loose and random. You don't want to create like a puffy princess cloud. Just add a lighter side to your sky. You could go in and do just a little bit up here. Always remember though, we're going to add the final layer of color using the palette knife. So if this is a lighter tone, don't completely cover it. You want to have all of this showing through for our final layer. And when you're going back and forth in between the two colors, the white and the blue, you get all the different values, which is also fun to see happen. Get a little closer to my tree. Your pattern goes away, but it's still something that gives you confidence where you're going to have to put your little houses. Add a little bit white right there. And it's neat, the white over the blue also, because it's a dry brush, allows you to have that canvas textured feel, which again just adds to the dimension of the painting. I'm going to add a little bit of white just to soften the edges over the blue. Okay. I think I'm going to skip down to the number 6. I'm going to slow down so everyone gets their background. Any questions about the background?
No, people are just painting along. Some people
I
are
love
asking when you get to the palette knife, some alternatives. So I was just throwing out some things that we've talked about before. Gift card, cardstock, cardboard. You could bend a plastic knife if you have some type of spatula, like a cake decorating spatula even. Any of those things will work. Back of a spoon people have used.
I think we had someone use a piece of poster board. Like the main thing is you just need a really flat, a little bit flexible, a little surface, you know, so it could be a poster board cut like that, a credit card cut like that. You just want to be able to very lightly skim it across a canvas. So yeah, there's so many things. Oh, I see a wait, please. I'll slow down. And another thing that someone asked in the last class, which was great. So Michael's has tons of different shaped palette knives. Some have a pointy tip, some are metal, some have a real wide center. All of those will work. This just happens to be the shape that I like to use. So if you've got a different shape, absolutely use it, because all you're really trying to do is learn the technique. Okay, I'm going to jump down to my number 6. And don't worry if you're not caught up, keep coming, because all we're doing is still dry brush base coating. So I'm just loading plain white, and all I'm going to do is, again, that exact same technique. Don't create a pattern, but just very loose random strokes in each little house. You're going to bump right up to the grass or the sky. You don't want, with a style like this, you don't want a straight, sharp edge. You want it to be very soft. So just, again, cover up your pattern, but don't try to almost color book paint, because you'll have a sharp edge in layered color, and you don't want that. Make that gray pop through. That's your shadows, and go all the way up onto your roof. We're going to add the yellow, the orange, and the red with a palette knife on most of these houses. So you're just base coating the white shape. It looks a little funny first, but that palette knife is so fun to see the magic at the very end. So then on this one, and don't forget, this was the little one. We can actually go back if you want to, get a little bit of white on your brush. You can see that there's this hard line where it's the side of the house. What you can do, if you're more comfortable doing that, so you've got your tall rectangle with your triangle sitting on the top, you can go in and just kind of create a really soft dry brushed line, just so you don't forget about the side that you're going to make the dark gray. If that gives you a little bit more confidence, just do a small skinny rectangle on the side of that house. Because again, we're going to create that with the palette knife only, but I want you to have the confidence to get that dimension. And then the front of the house, you're just going to dry brush again with the white. Just a little tip, and this is really what you feel comfortable with. So these two houses are touching. Again, we're going to add all of that detail with the palette knife. If you want to leave just a little, let's see, I'll do it with the white, just a little gray area. You might not even be able to see that on the canvas. Just to give you the confidence to separate the two houses, definitely do that. But if those turn into like a solid white area there, that is okay. I know that sounds confusing. I want you guys to know that the dry brush doesn't have to be perfect because the palette knife will add that dimension. But I don't want you to lose the shape of the side of that house. Does that make sense? No, I don't think at all. So I'm going all the way up to the top of the triangle. That's going to stay. That'll be dark. You know what we can do? Take a little bit of your white and a little bit of your medium gray and mix a light gray. I think that'll give us more confidence to add that detail with our palette knife. So a little bit of white and a little bit of the medium gray. And actually do that same technique on the side of that house with your long, skinny rectangle. That way we'll have a place to place our palette knife to create that shadow. So a little bit of white and a little bit of medium gray. We're losing our pattern a little, which is okay because we're applying our base coats. I'm going to do the same thing to the front of this little house. Well, actually, that's the side. Just using white. Very random strokes. Now, this is the house with the biggest roof line. So we're going to leave that top. We're not going to base coat that white, but remember, we did a big square. And that's the only part we're going to add the white to. And then I'm going to do exactly what we did for the side of that house. I'm going to get a little bit more of the gray. It doesn't have to be equal parts, but just a little bit of white and a little bit of the dark gray so you can get a medium tone gray. Blend that together. Take a little bit off on your paper towel and do those same loose strokes on this, which is the front of your house. The rectangle and the triangle. It's looking kind of funny, but it's going to get there, I promise. I'm going to clean off that brush if you've got all of your white applied. Clean it with the water. You want me to slow down? Am I going too fast? And definitely, like, this is just a great visual. I will add a little bit more white just so you guys can see it better on the screen. You can have one side a little bit brighter. Maybe I'll do this side a little bit brighter. And by brighter, we're not changing colors at all. We're just adding a little bit more of the dry brush white. And on this one, I'll have the side that's close to the tree a little bit brighter. You can see how one color just gives you all of that dimension. Okay. Cleaning that off, drying out most of the water. And that black cherry, this is one of my favorite folk art colors. Most beautiful, rich red color. That is the color we're using just for this little house. all the water's out of there. I'm going to load my brush and then take most of it off and just use that exact same technique. You can add a touch of white, barely any, and just see how just a touch of white pops off some of the areas of that red. You don't want to blend it and you don't want to mix it because you don't want to turn it pink. But if you mostly use the red and then you just barely touch into that white and do random strokes, you'll see it'll allow you to make a highlight as opposed to a pink shade. Mostly in the red and just a little, like it's just like a little dot of white and then random strokes. It just brings out the richness of that red color, which is nice. I almost caught myself making a line. Don't do that.
Yeah, and if you don't, so I'm just answering questions. If you don't have black cherry, you can always mix a brighter red with a dark brown or a black to get a deeper red. Or you could just have a bright red, or somebody was saying, can you make the house any color? A bunch of colorful houses would be really cute also. Like you could do a yellow house, a red house, a green house.
Oh, perfect.
House.
Yeah, that'd be so cute.
Love that.
It could be pastels. It could be, absolutely. Have fun with it. You can do whatever.
Little red barns. All the roofs could be red.
Love it.
Yeah.
That would be adorable.
Yeah, and the great thing is too, people were talking about not being cut up or going back. If you do this and you're like, don't love it, you can always paint right over it and then do it again tomorrow, or you can always go back and watch the video and paint along again, which is great. And that's what's so great about acrylic paint. It's so forgiving, and this technique, because of the palette knife and the brush strokes, it just is going to add more like depth and texture to your finished painting.
Absolutely. I know, because it looks like it's all layered and thick, but it's a smooth canvas if you want to start over. That is the great thing about the acrylics. You get the finish, but you don't have all those chunks of paint on there like if you were using an oil paint. Okay, how's everyone's dry brush base coat coming? I love to see them next to each other.
Yeah, this one's really fun to watch. And then Kirsten, I think we have the other one in the studio for next week, so we're going to preview next week's painting too before the end. I think
perfect. Okay.
There, so.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to barely sneak ahead. How's it going on speed? I'm going to put a little bit of the raw sienna, and you just need a little dab of paint. And a little bit of the yellow ochre, just a little. You can always get more, but you can't get that back in the bottle. And this really, there isn't a pattern, so I don't want anybody to be intimidated, but you see the top of your house. You see the top of your triangle. And because these roof lines are just very simple and straight, all I want you to do, we're going to create the hard edge using the palette knife. But all I want you to do is place the color on the canvas so that when you do use the palette knife, you're not at all intimidated. So I'm just getting that dark golden yellow, and that's on this little house. You guys see that? And again, I don't want you to draw a pattern. I don't want you to be, precise and outline that triangle. I just want you to get that color. And for this, you're not doing a full stroke. You're using just the flat edge of that brush, and you're just almost spackling that on there just to get placement. If you outline like that, or if you get a solid coat like that, you're not going to be as pleased because it's not going to have the dimension with the gray showing through. So you're almost spackling that on just for placement. That'll give you a lot of confidence when you're using your palette knife at the end. You can see I'm just barely going over this second house. But again, it's not a straight line. It's not perfect. You just want the color. I'm not even going to go into the water. I'm just going to go on my paper towel, and I'm going to pick up that raw sienna, and I'm going to do the same thing on this middle house. And the only thing I'm going to do different here is I'm going to do a little bit thinner on the left and a little bit thicker on the right. So just little hash marks, very little paint. You can always go in and add more. And it's okay if you have, like, if you do a few strokes that create the line, but you just don't want to outline it. Learning the techniques is what's so fun, and the ways that you can make this your own style of painting. And if you're just coloring, you know, inside the lines, you're not learning as much as of the techniques. So it's just a little bit thicker, but again, little hash strokes just to get that color placement for when we go in and do the palette knife. There's some blue coming through, there's some white coming through. You want that. You don't want to lose that dimension. It looks really funny, but it'll get there, I promise. You don't want a straight line. And really, there's no right or wrong about right here. I just ended it with pretty much a straight line, but not perfect. But it's not too high, it's not too low. Just make sure that it's even on both sides. That's really the only thing that matters. But you're overlapping your white. Your pattern should be gone. That's why I always encourage you to do a really, really light pattern. If you would have done a thick one, you would have still had a white line. You would have still had a white line around your tree. You would have had a white line on this edge of this gray house. You just want to always make sure that you apply that first pattern very light so it's covered up. So now we've used all of the colors. So another little trick, and this is up to you guys, I am gonna clean, actually, you know what? I'm gonna switch to that little number 2 brush. Am I? Yep, okay. And this is up to you guys. So I did the doors and the windows kind of similar to the flowers for anyone that joined us last week. But because I want you guys to be confident painters, if you have more confidence using the palette knife with a placement guide, use your smallest brush and that dark gray, no water, and let's place our doors and our windows. Again, if you feel super confident and you don't want to do that, don't. Here's the 2 reasons why you wouldn't. I am not going to place my doors because I want to be able to use my palette knife in a bigger area. I want to be able to create that texture, that white, almost stucco texture on the entire front of my house. If you apply a pattern for your door, it's not impossible, but you're going to have to kind of work around that. So a lot of people just like to have the guide as the placement. So if you want that, I would just go in and just very light with the gray, again, dry brush, mark where your door is going to be. If that gives you more confidence, then you would mark where your 3 windows are. But again, I'm not going to do it. I want you guys not to do it. I just want everyone to have a successful painting. So I'm trying to give you some tips to just be confident. Using the palette knife is a little tricky at first, but it's so much fun if you keep doing it. Okay, so everything should be base coated. Look very loose, very impressionistic, lots of gray canvas coming through, lots of layered colors. You can see where everything is gonna be, maybe except for your doors, your windows, and the trunk of your tree. Any questions to get to this spot?
No, everyone's just painting along tonight.
Oh, I love it.
Very quiet evening, just painting. Again, this one's like very soothing for some reason.
I hope soothing is good.
No, I keep like yawning, like not in a bad way. I'm just like kind of content watching you paint.
Stick with me, don't fall asleep.
Oh, so good.
I'm just kidding.
It looks great.
Okay, well, everyone's base coating. All I am gonna do is put, how's it going? I love to look at the comments. This is stop, go. Okay, I'm gonna put the dark green on my palette. but no rush. Keep dry brushing if that's what you guys are doing. I'm going to put a little bit of that pistachio and a little bit of the white. Never too close together. One, because it's fun to blend colors, but with the palette knife, you need room around your palette to pick up each one. Okay, so maybe what we'll do is a little technique on how to use the palette knife or whatever little tool you're using. There's no right or wrong. I'm never going to tell you to load, you know, just a ½ inch in or 3/4 in. I'm just going to say a lot or a little because, again, I don't want you guys to be intimidated by this amazing tool. So when you load a palette knife, there's really only 2 tricks. You load just the flat bottom. You don't load the top, you don't load the sides, you load just the flat bottom, and you use it flat with your canvas. So you're not up like a brush, you're not at a hard angle, but you're flat with your canvas. A trick that I love to do is I am so much more successful if I move my canvas around. Sometimes I feel more natural pushing away from me. Some people feel more natural pulling towards them. Whatever is most comfortable, but pick that canvas up and get that in your hand because it'll give you confidence using the palette knife. So I'm going to scoot that to the side and I'm actually going to do it on this little piece of palette paper. So you pounce in the paint and then you just kind of pounce out. I'm going to use the bottom half, so just a little bit of the palette. And it never looks great on here, but I want you guys to be very light-handed. I don't want you to mash it in and drag it because then again, you'll create a pattern. But you're almost going to just place it on your canvas and just softly drag, which that looks awful and weird on this. But when you get that kind of texture on your canvas, you're absolutely going to love it. So you load as you need paint. Tap in and tap out. You've got a lot. Is that helpful ever? Not really. You've got a good amount of paint on there. But not too much. And then very light-handed and flat with your canvas, you're just going to skim across that surface. Is that kind of helpful? Let me see. Another thing we're going to do tonight is we're going to load one color. So we're going to load that green, and then we're going to pick up just a little bit of another color, and then we're going to pounce to blend those just a little bit, like we're double loading our palette knife. And the same exact technique, you're just going to be very light-handed and you're going to skim across that canvas. And the goal is actually to have more paint and then to use it all up as you get to the bottom or as you get to the end, because again, that's what creates just lots of shading and highlighting. Okay, I'm going to pick up the dark green. I've got a little of that light green on there. That's okay, but I'm not going to pick any more of the light green up just yet. So just the dark green. And I know I feel like I say the same thing over and over. I apologize. I don't want you to create a pattern with your palette knife either, because that's a look that you're not going to like. I want you to pick a spot. I'm going to start on the edge of this first little house. I'm going to turn my canvas because, again, I'm most comfortable pushing away from me. I'm going to start on the edge of that house, and I'm just going to skim across. The darks are the hard ones to see on the camera. I'm going to skim across the canvas. It's hard to see. Can you guys see how it adds? You know what? Let me do it with the lighter green. I'm going to pick up some of the lighter green, pounce into the paint, and then pounce right next to it. For this one, I'm going to start on this side of my canvas, but again, I'm more comfortable working a little bit pushing away from me. I'm going to start on the edge. Don't apply pressure. Just start it by just letting it touch down and then just drag across the canvas very lightly. You'll have more paint, and then as it comes off of your palette knife, it just creates a softer green texture towards the end. Picking up paint again. Let's see, this time. You don't always have to start left to right. I'm going to start actually kind of in the middle, and at a different angle, I'm going to go up that way. Oh, that one did good. Can you guys see how it just adds another layer of dimension? Shadows, highlights in that grass field. I'm going to do it pulling towards me this time. I'm not mashing that in. Just very loose and random, dragging that across your canvas. I'm going to pick up the dark green. I'm going to start right up here. I'm not going to outline. I'm just going to drag in one direction. And then I'm going to pick up some green. I'm going to start maybe more in the middle, pull down just a little, but not going totally from left to right. I'm going to start right there and just pull off the canvas. You can turn it this way and maybe do a stroke going down. Oh, that's perfect. So see where the green jumped over the light? Just giving you another layer of texture. Like we've been oil painting for hours. For here, under this house, to create kind of a line, I'm going to start at the base of that house and just pull down. A great tip for all of the techniques that we're using today is less is more. You can always go back in and add more paint to your palette knife, but it's hard to take it off. So going over several times is way better than having too much paint on your palette. I'm going to pick up a little bit of that pistachio. I'm going to touch it into the white, pounce it on my palette paper just to mix it a little. There's no right or wrong way to load it on your palette knife. And starting on this bottom, let me make sure you guys can see this. Starting on this bottom area, I'm going to drag that into the canvas, picking up more paint as I need it. And just skimming softly over the top. What's so neat about that is you've got the dark base coat still showing. You've got the dry brush technique with the canvas texture still showing. And then you've got these great pops of color with the palette knife. I'm gonna get a little bit more pistachio. You use a lot of paint when you're using the palette knife. You just don't want to use so much that you cover up all the work that you've done to get there. I'm gonna get a little bit more of that dark green also. Okay, a little bit of dark green, a little bit of pistachio, and then mix it just by pouncing up and down. If you've got more dark green, that is okay. And I'm just going to kind of continue to add layers of the green at the bottom of those houses, kind of coming down a little bit, keeping the darker under the house, the medium green towards the middle, and then a little pop of white where the closest part of the photo would be if you were working off of a photo of a field of houses. Is that showing up? I know that dark green is a hard one. Let me add a little bit more of the light. Never adding any water to the paint, only for cleaning, because that would muddy all of that together and you would lose all of that dimension. Never go back and forth, never scrub, just very soft on the canvas and let the palette knife really do the work by pulling it really softly over the top of the canvas. I always like to say, add a little bit of that palette knife texture to the edges, again, just because it looks finished and so nice. A really nice finished look. Okay, And whenever I clean my palette knife, I just use a paper towel. If there's a little bit of green on there, it'll come right off on the paper towel. And at the very end, you can give it a good cleaning. I'm going to flip my palette paper over. And now we're going to go to the blue in the sky. So that same sky blue, we're using just these few colors, but we're getting so many different tones because of the techniques that we're using. Make sure I have a little bit more white. Sometimes this is, there's no dark value, like there was the dark green in that. Sometimes 2 light values is much easier to see on the class. So let me see. So I am going to load my palette knife just like we did before. I'm going to pounce it in the sky blue, a little bit less than half, pounce in the paint and then pounce off. You don't want to remove all of your paint, but just have not big drips or clumps. Move your canvas to whatever is comfortable. I'm going to pull down and towards me, and very light-handed. Again, don't mash down. You just want to jump across that canvas. I'm going to pull this one towards me. See how it jumped from there to there? I'm going to pick that back up. That's actually the edge of the canvas. You can create a sharp line where your roof is. You can start right on your roof line and pull in that direction. You want to definitely move that canvas around so that your pattern, you're not creating a pattern. Oh, that one was perfect. I never know what you can see on the Zoom. But see how you've got all of those layers, a thicker area of the blue with the gray. That is exactly what you want to create that beautiful finish. I'm going to turn that and pull towards me. Really, the only key with this palette knife is not to create a pattern and not to mash it into the canvas. You want to keep it very light and airy, and you want to move that canvas around. So every now and then you'll use a little bit more of the edge. So on this little area in between these 2 houses, I'm going to sit up on the edge just a little, but then I'm just barely going to pull to divide those houses. That would just be dry brush, so don't forget about little areas like that. You don't have to do it completely with the palette knife, but you definitely want to get in there and get that texture so it matches the rest of your canvas. I've got the blue on there. I'm going to go right into the white, almost like you're double loading it. And I'm going to add white where I want it. You'll see on my canvas, there's just a little white area in the sky over here. Pick up paint as you need it. I'm just going to softly drag that. That one was perfect. The light colors are great to see on the video. Let's see how you've got that layer of shading, highlighting, pops of color with very little work. I'm going to scoop my canvas. I'm going to pull that way. The white's the best one to show this technique. I'm going to do a little bit, just barely, with what's on my palette knife in between those 2 houses. A little bit at an angle, just so I don't create a pattern.
Just called you the palette knife queen.
I like a palette knife, I have to say. It's just a really fun, it's just fun. And you get so many different looks. So at first it's probably a little bit intimidating, or just you're not used to it. Practice with it, because you can base coat. Something that's really fun with a palette knife is you could create, like, just look at this little area of the canvas. Wouldn't that be a beautiful background, and then put like a beach scene on top of it? Yep. And you could do all of that with the palette knife. It can create beautiful backgrounds, beautiful faux finishes, sharp edges, but it's so much more fun to create shading and highlighting with this than layering and blending for me. Yeah. It's just a really fun technique. So you should have just a lot of dimension in your sky and in your grass. And now we're going to go in and do all of that exactly the same with our palette knife to do the final touches on our house.
And the tree trunk. Everyone's worried about the tree trunk.
We're going to get the tree trunk. He's super easy. So I'm going to
It
add
could
a
be a
little bit
bush.
more white. Well, yeah, it could be a bush. A little bit of white and a little bit of gray. Clean off that palette knife. Again, no need for water. Oh, I like the white because it's just so good to see on the Zoom class. So we're going to start with our little guy. And I am going to load only the white, and following that roof line, I'm going to start there. I'm not going to outline, but I'm going to set it on the roof line. And I'm going to just pull straight down. I'm going to load some more paint. I'm going to turn that canvas so I'm comfortable. I'm going to start on that side of the house. I'm not going to outline, but I'm just going to pull forward. This is where I was telling you guys earlier, if you've got your little door there, totally fine. You would just kind of work around it. But I am able, because I don't have my little door there, to just pull all the way across. Either one is right. I just want you to mainly be confident. You can, if you like a crisp line at the bottom, you can turn that canvas to how you're comfortable. And you can start at the bottom and do a little palette pull up. Just make sure that you don't cover up all the hard work that you did with the dry brush and the dark base coat. I'm going to do the same thing with this center house. I'm going to start on that roof line and just pull down, load a little bit more paint, turn my canvas. Maybe I'll go this way. I want this side to be a little bit brighter where the sun is hitting it. I'm going to pull, work in that way. I'm going to leave that edge just a little bit darker. You never want to outline, draw, drag. Not with this technique. Same thing, just white on my palette knife. I'm going to pull straight down on this little barn house with the red roof. I'm going to turn that and maybe pull that way. Now I'm going to pick up a little bit. I've got the white on there. I'm going to pick up a little bit of the gray. Remember, dark colors change a color really, really quick. So less is more. But I've just kind of pounced up and down until all you're really doing is breaking up the line between two colors. You don't have to have it equal parts gray and equal parts white. You just don't want a harsh line when you have two colors. This dark area of this house, I know I moved my canvas a whole bunch. I'm going to do that with the darker gray. Pick up a little bit more dark gray. Maybe I'll turn it this way for that one and I'll pull towards me. You want to create that line where the side of the house is different from the front. I'm going to do the same with this side of the barn, the front where the door is. I'm going to start on that line and just pull towards me. Got 5 or 6 shades of gray and white on that palette knife, but I'm really only using 2 colors. That's what I love about that. I'm going to turn it that way, and I'm going to create that line right there, starting on the edge, but very softly pulling. And really just have fun with it. Add as much texture onto your little houses as you like. I can go in on this guy. The side is a little bit dark. I'm going to add just some white. I'm going to soften that edge a little, and I'm just going to pull that. Oh, that was perfect. See how you get all that layered chippy paint? It's almost like a barnwood leather or barnwood weathered look. Not leather. I'm going to pull that down just because I want a little bit more highlight. I might add a little bit of dark on this house just to separate them from that house. Oh, it's starting to look like Italy. That's making me really happy.
Just need a big glass of wine.
Oh, I would like that. How's it going loading the palette knife? Any questions about like maybe the edges?
I mean, people are loving it, like, and so different than what people have done before. They're loving the palette knife, saying amazing things about you teaching. I get to see all the good stuff. I'm just sitting here getting all the oohs and ahs. It's so good. I wish you could see it all.
I know, I love to see it. Okay, so I am gonna put, for everyone, anyone that's caught up with me, just a little bit of those two colors that we base coated. So the raw sienna, that yellow, and a little bit of that black cherry onto my palette. I'm not gonna start yet, so everybody catch up doing your white and your gray on your houses, and always a little bit of white. Oh, you know what I forgot to do? I am gonna bring back in my green. Now's a good time. Again, don't feel rushed, do your houses, but that exact same technique. I'm gonna pick up a little bit of the dark green. I'm gonna turn my canvas, and I am just gonna add some dimension to that tree. I'm gonna pick up a little bit of the light green, and I'm just gonna let that scoot over my tree. The lightest green, I'm gonna add a touch of white. White's great, it's like where the sun is touching your painting, that little pop of, and I'm just gonna, again, don't make almost like a scalloped edge, because you'll be disappointed in that. You just want it to overlap that area to give the impression of that tree. Okay. Picking up the darkest green. Drum roll, we're doing the trunk. Trunk of the tree. Super advanced. Super advanced. Not really, it's the easiest thing in the world. All I want you guys to do is just drag down with the darkest green, and then just soften the bottom with the tip of that palette knife. Super simple. And then if you want to create a little highlight, maybe where it's sitting on the hill, you could just run that softer green just at the bottom. Very simple.
Oh, big relief. We have a trunk.
Woo! We planted our tree. It's in the ground. Okay, so now you're just, the finishing touches are always the most fun. Let me turn that palette around. I'm gonna first pick up this middle house roof color, which is the, let's see, raw sienna. And I'm gonna load just the bottom, the bottom half. And I'm just gonna pull towards my little house. It's just cleaning up that base coat a little bit, creating a little bit of an edge without making it a solid. I'm gonna do that right there. I'm gonna add a touch of white, load that on my palette. Because again, remember, all you want to do is not have a clear line between light and dark. So the white and the brown, pounce that, and then just go in there and just barely touch and pull. Get more paint, just barely touch and pull. If I had to paint shingles like that were detailed, oh, it would be a disaster. But that gives you the impression of just a very detailed roof. I'm gonna clean that off, not using any water. And the same thing with that yellow, just on the bottom edge. And I'm just gonna create that roof line. You can go down for one stroke. You can go across for the other side, because that'll give you a little bit of a different value. I'm going to overlap that house just a little bit. I'm going to do, again, just a touch of white, but soften that line by pouncing it onto your palette, just to create that area where the sun is touching your roof.
I'm like a cat. I keep turning my head every time you turn that canvas.
I probably should. I got to learn how to not.
No, it's great. I just keep tilting with you.
That's hysterical. And then the same thing with the red. I've still not used any water. First, I'm going to pick up just the red. And I'm going to pull, I'm not going to turn the canvas. I'm going to pull it just down. But the same color, dry brushed, palette knifed, is different. It has just a different tone because of the different technique that we're using. I'm going to pull that down. I love when it jumps over a little bit, like maybe the gray and the white, just adding to the dimension of your canvas. So this little guy is just a little stroke you're going to do at the very end. You're just going to see that we didn't apply a pattern. We didn't outline it. We're just going to add that red part of the roof. Halfway loaded, I'm just going to start on the edge and just very carefully pull that down. Just to get a non-perfect straight line, but enough to create dimension. And then the fun part, a touch of white, but soften that line and drag that to create the spot where the sun is touching the roof. Really softly. I think that's our roofs. Okay, and then like our little flowers at the end last week, drying off or cleaning off my palette knife. I'm just gonna get that gray. And what we did last week with the flowers is we just kind of touched the end of it to create flower petals. What we are gonna do is load about half of it. And this is the only time we're really going to focus on that edge a little bit, but we're still going to be soft. We're still going to be flat with our canvas, but we're just going to touch on the edge and kind of pull down. So it creates a straight line, but it also creates that dimension. So let's see. I'm just going to load the end, just like we've been doing, pouncing in the paint and then pouncing off. I like to have that one in there so you guys can see it. I'm going to do this little door first, right over my white. And some of my white is still a little bit wet. That's okay with a technique like this. I'm going to start on that edge and just pull down so it creates that line. I'm going to load more paint. I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. Create that line. And then I'm just going to do one little soft drag to fill that little doorway in. You want those little pops of white, again, just to give dimension and character. And I'm going to do the same thing with a little door there. Oh, I got a little too much. Get that off. But I'm going to just pull down to create my pattern. Pull down on both sides. My chair's a little squeaky every time I move. And then I'm just going to fill that in, but with the same technique. You're not trying to draw, you're not trying to scratch, you're not trying to do that. You're just softly skimming, but just a very short stroke. Same with my little window. I'm going to create a line, more for confidence than anything else. I'm going to create that little line, and then I'm going to go just the same quick little stroke. Create that line and then fill it in by going left to right. You can move your canvas to get the bottom if that makes it a little easier. And then for my second window, I'm going to do the same thing. And have fun with this. If you want two little farm windows, if you like just the doors, that's kind of a cute look. I started with just doors when I did this in the beginning. Make it your own. Two little lines. Just for confidence, but then that same technique. You don't want, after doing all of this and having all of that great dimension, you don't want straight lines on your windows because they would pop off the canvas too much and they wouldn't fit in. I'm just pulling it that way. 3 little windows are on this red farmhouse. You can use the edge to create a place for them to sit. But then just the same exact technique, pulling left to right, very softly, creating those little windows. And then the same with your little door. Flat on your edge. and then fill that in. Flip it over for the bottom if that's easier. Sometimes it just depends on how you're comfortable holding your palette knife. Like on this little guy, I'm going to give him a straighter bottom, so I'm just going to flip that over. And then you've got windows, you've got doors, you've got shading and highlighting and dimension and just so much character in a painting with just simple techniques of the palette knife and the dry brush.
Love it.
Any questions? How'd it go?
I think everybody's good. Lots of people painting along. I can see people. It's awesome. So, Kirsten, I am going to pick a winner, and then you also have the class for next week. So we wanted to show everybody while we were here. We always forget to do that. So I think, yep.
I forget the name of it. Beautiful, Where I Want to Be Sunset?
Summer sunset, yeah. All want to be at the beach safely?
Yeah.
Hashtag.
Yep.
So Jessie will be back next week, and she's going to be painting this beach. So excited, just want to show everybody. So sign up to take this. Again, completely different technique. Love it. Kirsten, thank you so much. Everybody loved
thank
it.
You guys.
Amazing teacher. Thank you everybody truly for letting us do this and joining. It is so important to us, and we're so thankful for Michael's and you guys. So
yes.
As happy as everybody is, we're so thankful to be here and appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so
I love when they hold them up. Oh, those are beautiful.
I know, it's so good.
That looks so, and one is taller. That's so beautiful.
Yeah.
Oh, I hope you guys enjoyed. Oh my gosh, I love seeing them. I'm so excited.
Kirsten would stay here all night and
I would
critique
stay
each
here all
other.
night. I would for sure.
All right.
Oh, look, he's running back in. Hold it up, hurry. Oh, they did it as a family. Oh my gosh, they're so beautiful.
They're good. And you guys don't forget to go to our Let's Paint Facebook group, and you can post them there because Kirsten and Jessie always get on.
I'm voting for the Bowden family, just saying. Just saying.
All right, you guys ready? I don't know, I can't see all who's watching here, if everybody's still on here. All right, so no last name.
She did a big one. That looks beautiful.
Elizabeth? I'm gonna say Elizabeth, and 10 people are gonna be like, it's me. Elizabeth, are you still watching? Oh, I see waving hands. It's just your lucky day if your name's Elizabeth today also, I guess. So Elizabeth, make sure you go to Plaid Crafts Facebook page, direct message us, and let us know that you won, and we will get you guys product.
Oh, you guys, they look so good.
Plaid Crafts Facebook page. Woo woo!
Oh, Christina, that's beautiful. Oh my gosh, I
everybody.
love that.
So everybody,
bye.
Yeah, join us next Monday. Jessie will be back. You guys, thank you so much. We love them. We hope you had fun. We'll see you next Monday. Kirsten, we have to go.
Bye, everyone.
Bye. Have a good week.